Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, insurance broker to the stars, and today we're going to be talking about the three terrifying insurance implications of the Solarwinds breach. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. All right, first things first, what happened? I'm just going to assume if you're watching this video that you are keeping up to date with the sheer insanity that is the Solarwinds breach. This story seems to evolve at least every hour. Looks like Microsoft was involved. I mean, it's just never ending. And so I'm going to go ahead and skip the entire backstory here, or this video is going to be dated before it's even published. So a little bit of brief background I think everybody here should be interested in is actually this story from Josephine Wolf, a very, very smart professor and also an author. And I think this gives some good background. And what's interesting here is she talks about the second and third and so forth order effects that could be associated with this. So it looks like in a few instances that we've seen so far, it's the hackers, whoever they were, went after the clients of SolarWinds, not necessarily just SolarWinds proper. So then that, I mean, you essentially, you have this exponentially growing threat area that could have been exposed here. So that is particularly terrifying, and that is one of kind of the key points of this particular presentation. Good news is that SolarWinds Orion looks like it was a large enterprise platform. So generally my understanding is 1,500 seats or above. So at least directly impacted, not talking about indirectly here, but directly impacted are those large businesses, about 18,000 of them so far. But it looks like if you're an SMB and you're utilizing an MSP, you're probably okay, at least directly at this point. So you'll see here, this is the latest I got from Paul. Shout out to you. I'm not going to use your last name, but thank you so much for sending this over. And it says SolarWinds MSP products, including RMM and InCentral, don't appear to be impacted as of yet. So if you're using an MSP, at least directly in that particular vertical, you're probably going to be okay, but obviously check for yourself. Now, of course, I'm a E&O and cyber insurance guy, and this is really kind of particular interest to me is the insurance tie-in and how this is going to play out. So directly, I'll say that the first thing I think businesses need to understand that may have potentially been infected by this. So if you're an SMB and you're using an MSP and you're like, hey, my MSP isn't using this, this was a supply chain attack. So you still need to go out and see, okay, were any of your suppliers or vendors actually potentially impacted by this? Because this could just go on and on and on. These attacks could just kind of daisy chain down the entire supply chain, as it were. So you have to be particularly careful here. And one thing I think that people constantly overlook is this idea of a potential claim. So obviously, if you have a claim in the cyber world, kind of an easy example of that is going to be you have a data breach. Your IT guy comes to you and he says, everything has been stolen and it looks like it went to North Korea. Or, hey, boss, everyone's got this ransomware notification popping on their computers. We got a big problem here. Okay, that is obviously a claim. That really kind of, I think, makes sense to most people. What doesn't really get hammered home a lot is this idea of a potential claim. And potential claims are particularly dangerous because a potential claim is anything that could potentially bring rise to a claim. So now if we're looking at these supply chain attacks, okay, was your supply, any of your vendors or suppliers in that chain potentially affected by the SolarWinds breach? If so, okay, could that be construed as a potential claim? And what's interesting, if we kind of dig into this clause here that I pulled out of an insurance policy, what it says here is, hey, you have the option of notifying the insurance company of a potential claim that could later become a claim. But to do so, you must give written notice as soon as possible and within the policy period. So before I mentioned the word dangerous, this is why. It's because, generally speaking, if you have a potential claim over here, you renew your policy, then the claim hits. During that discovery process with your insurance company, they're going to go back and they're going to say, okay, was this a potential claim? Did you have any reasonable knowledge that this could later become a claim after your policy renewed? And if so, most likely they're going to deny you coverage for that particular claim. Now, one thing I think that everyone needs to realize is just the sheer magnitude of this breach. So I hate to be cynical here, but insurance companies do not make money constantly paying out on very, very large claims, nor do they make money by paying out on tens of thousands of small claims on a constant basis. That's not how the business model is set up. That's not how they stay solvent. So what's the easiest way to deny coverage for somebody? It's declination of coverage due to late report of a potential claim. You didn't report a potential claim, you renewed your insurance, claim hits, boom, probably going to be denied coverage on that. That is something I think every business owner out there needs to seriously be worried about, given just the sheer magnitude of this particular breach here. And as we're moving on and we're learning more and more about this, business owners need to stay up to date to realize, okay, maybe you asked your vendors last week, anybody in that supply chain, nobody said they were affected. Maybe this week that story has changed. So you need to make sure you're staying on top of this. And you notice this last little clause here, all it's really saying is, hey, if you report to us a potential claim and it later becomes a claim, we're going to treat that as if you made the claim during the policy period. Obviously, the other side of that, which I've spoken about before, is if you don't report that potential claim during the policy period, you renew your coverage and then a claim hits, specifically in this circumstance dealing with anything Solarwinds related, now you're going to have a problem. And why do insurance companies do that? Their easiest defense in court is they're going to say, hey, we would have known about this and we would have covered this in the last policy period, but they didn't report it. But if we would have known that there was an issue of this magnitude, we never would have offered them insurance at the renewal period. And so because of that, we're just not going to cover this claim. It's pretty cut and dry in the policy. Yes, it is generally pretty cut and dry, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for. And that's one of the reasons that people hate insurance companies. So make sure you're taking that seriously. The next thing we need to talk about is the lawfare element and why everybody needs to stop blaming Russia. I do not understand this fascination with just everything is Russia's fault. It's like they're the boogeyman under every bed in the world. It's a little more particular than that, and here's why. This goes back actually to Mondelez v. Zurich, which as far as I'm aware, is still an ongoing court case. And this is particularly interesting, and it has serious direct ramifications on the SolarWinds breach. And this is why. So in about 2017, Mondelez got hit with the NotPetya virus, and they said that it infected about 1,700 servers and something like 24,000 laptops. So that's a lot of hardware they had to replace, amongst some other allegations as well. So Mondelez went out to their insurance company, Zurich Insurance Company, and they said, hey, this cost us over $100 million. We know we have a $100 million insurance policy, so we're filing a claim. We want to be reimbursed for this. That's what we pay insurance for. Well, Zurich Insurance Company, you have to understand that insurance companies are not just in the business of paying out hundreds of millions of dollars when people ask for them. And when you have policy limits this large, obviously insurance companies are really going to start looking through that with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to start saying, okay, what can we hang our hat on here to potentially deny coverage? Or if you want to be even more cynical, it's what can we potentially try and deny coverage on here and just space this claim out for a few years. Meanwhile, we're taking all the revenue from those premium investments. And so, you just look at the sheer economics of it and you're going, okay, well, if I'm an insurance company, it's going to cost me, say, $3 million over the next 3 years to defend this claim. But then in profits off those premium payments, I'm going to be generating $4 million. It's pretty straightforward. And then, hey, maybe at the end of the day, this novel legal construction actually flies, and then we save $100 million. So what do we have to lose? Well, this is the clause that I think everybody needs to be aware of. And if I was a bet man, I'd say this is in your insurance policy as well. And it's the War Exclusion Act. And this thing has been around for probably 60-something years at this point. And up until this point, it's been pretty straightforward. We've always thought of this as a kinetic warfare clause. We've never thought of this in terms of cyber warfare. But here's what the clause said actually in the Mondelez policy. It said this policy excludes loss or damage directly or indirectly caused by or resulting from hostile or warlike action in time of peace or war. So what Zurich is trying to do is they're trying to apply this to the NotPetya virus, saying that, hey, this came from Russia. And how they do that? It was actually the White House press secretary that issued a statement essentially blaming Russia for this. Now, we know anybody who's ever worked in forensics, trying to attribute a specific attack to anybody is incredibly difficult. And if my memory serves me correctly, it was actually the Snowden whistleblower breach, however you want to phrase that. It actually came out that the NSA had tools that they had developed to actually attribute attacks to other nation states or other entities. So it's not just as simple as saying like, hey, this was XYZ nation state, because that has serious ramifications as far as insurance goes. And you can see here just Mondelez, and there were other cases in this vein, it costs them potentially $100 million or in excess of $100 million. So what I see coming up here is insurance companies going, okay, there are, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of businesses implicated by this breach with this whole supply chain attack. It's going to be really hard to figure out how this is actually going to play out. So we're going to try and hang our hat on this war exclusion, and we're just going to stretch this out for as long as we can. Meanwhile, businesses are going to be going without those insurance payments. So obviously, if you're a very, very large company, you can probably take that hit. If you're just a regional player, you're an SMB or a local player, that's going to be a much harder hit to take. So not necessarily the most fun thing, but I think people should be aware of that potentiality. Next, let's talk about those renewal implications. And this is where I think we're going to see action for even longer than all the other potential negative ramifications of the SolarWinds breach. So I think first thing is going to be, if you actually used Orion, if you're an Orion client, I think you're going to be having a very hard time or almost an impossible time for renewals. And obviously you guys know the background here, but the reason for that is trying to figure out what these guys actually did, given the footprint of this particular breach, is going to be really hard or almost impossible. And I know the sizzles out there, if you're watching this, you're probably like, hey, my Christmas is gone. And I'm really sorry for that. But now you're going to have to be worrying about those renewal implications and, if your business can even get cyber insurance. And if so, it could be costing you an arm and a leg. Otherwise, let's say you do get renewal terms. There could be some sort of conditional renewal on there. So there could be some sort of endorsement that's coming out. And this could be for businesses not even directly related to Orion. And they could be saying, hey, if there's anything related to an Orion breach, we're not going to be covering that type of claim. And you're really going to have to be careful if you're a business owner out there, because they could just try and sneak that particular endorsement into the very end of a policy. And if you don't see that, you could get burned. So make sure you're watching out for those conditional renewals. The next thing you can have is just very high renewal premiums for the entire industry moving forward, whether you were impacted by this Orion breach or not. And that could just be because the insurance industry, it's a hard economic market right now. So we're calling that a hard market. That's where premiums are increasing. Traditionally, cyber insurance has been really, really affordable, but moving forward, that's just not the case. So we could just be seeing very high premiums or an increase in premiums across the entire market, because the cyber insurance industry is going to go, okay, we don't even know how to quantify this risk. So what we need to start doing is actually just raising those premiums, or at the very least using this as an excuse to raise those premiums, because we could be facing, a huge shortfall of cash that we're going to have to pay out here in the near future if we ever figure out how far this actually went. And even if we don't know that this was somehow related to the Orion breach, we could just be seeing an increase of breaches kind of across the board, depending upon what was stolen and what these guys went to. And then finally, I think every business owner needs to really be aware that I could see, well, I've already seen for tech E&O, but I could see also in cyber renewals as well, there could be a specific line item or an underwriter question that comes back, and they're going to go, were you in any way, shape, or form potentially implicated with an Orion breach at any suppliers, vendors, et cetera? They're going to make that question as broad as possible. And why are they going to do that? They're going to be thinking to themselves in the back of their head, it's not really the underwriter, it's the head underwriters, it's the attorneys, legal counsel at these insurance companies. They're going to go, okay, we need to limit our exposure to this, and we got to do this now. So if we're going to be bleeding cash, we want to make the blood, we're going to have to just really kind of ratchet down here and make sure that we are not just stepping on a landmine moving forward. So if you do see a questionnaire like that, I would just encourage you, do your due diligence and make sure you understand exactly what you were answering to, because the last thing you want is some sort of material misrepresentation there. All right, finally, moving forward, let's kind of talk about things I think every business owner really needs to take moving forward here. Obviously, keep a close eye on the news and stay informed for your unique business. So this story is changing seemingly every hour. It's only getting worse. And so make sure you're understanding what's going on, how it's going on. There's a lot of good articles out there. I mentioned one previously. There's also a lot of great videos on YouTube and other platforms where you can get just a quick and dirty rundown from a bunch of cybersecurity guys to see what those implications could be. Next, make sure you're understanding the insurance side. That's what I talked in this video. But obviously, there could be more implications coming out. I'll try and update as necessary. Next, make sure you understand that supply chain. I think every business needs to start reaching out and talking to their various suppliers to go, okay, were you impacted by this? Do you think you could be impacted by that? And if so, what are the possible ramifications for your particular business? Excuse me. Next, if you're carrying large limits, so if you kind of have like a catch-all policy or you have a large limit cyber policy or some sort of all limit, all risk type policy with very large limits on it, you really need to start digging through and taking this seriously. And you need to start thinking about, okay, if insurance gets denied, so just a straight declination and there's nothing we can do, or we have to fight this in court, you need to kind of start thinking about how that's going to impact your business and what you could do to survive in this tough economic environment. If you're small to normal size limit policies, you're probably unlikely to have a problem directly, but then again, you could always have those indirect second or third order effects that could impact your business as well. Next, it's always just a great time. This is a great reminder that no business is safe. No matter how much you spend on cybersecurity, there's always going to be a problem that could come knocking on your door. So if you haven't already, just take a round turn there, look at those policies, plans, and procedures that you have or don't have in place. So it's everything from incident response, breach response plans to remote workers policies, mobile device policies, how you guys are handling bring your own devices. Really the full gamut there. You guys need to start thinking about making sure that all of these are in place, that employees are properly trained, and you understand exactly what's going on and how people are dealing with your particular network. Next, make sure you have the right cyber insurance. That's kind of a no-brainer, but hopefully for those SMBs out there, you're not going to be impacted by this. Unfortunately, I think a lot of you probably are. So if you are, make sure that you have the right cyber insurance. Right after this, we'll talk about how you do that. Next, speak with your IT and your MSP. That's kind of your first line of defense. Go out to those subject matter experts. Make sure you understand what's going on with your particular business. And then finally, if you're ever in doubt, I have a master's in cybersecurity law. I am not an attorney, so I'm not providing legal advice. Nor am I providing any sort of official insurance advice here. So you need to make sure that if you have any questions, if you're ever in doubt, go out, talk to appropriate legal counsel that's qualified to advise you in this particular area to make sure that you are minimizing your odds of getting in trouble. All right, and with that cheery note, if you're as happy as this puppy, this is Damage Control Cyber Insurance Compliance, my latest book on everything you wanted to know about cyber insurance and the regulatory side. You can download it for free at this link right here. It's also available on Amazon in both Kindle and physical versions. If you appreciated this, please make sure you talk to your fellow business owners out there, anybody else in the business community. Share this video. Make sure they understand what could be potentially coming down the pipe here. And with that, it's going to be a crazy world out there, but stay safe.